Tell me something, who the hell is still watching Fast and Furious movies? Rocket cars are back. Or are they? Big black balls make their first appearance in a Fast and Furious movie? Dodge Chargers doing what they do in real life? Crash. And somebody snuck in a JDM car into the lineup. Was Dennis McCarthy on vacation that week? What happened? It's week 16 of the filming, so it's time for an update on Fast 10, which should be called Fasten Your Seatbelts. That story is coming up right after the break. I don't know if you know this, but I actually now have a merch store, and if you haven't checked out the video description below my videos, then you're missing out. Currently, I've got a pack full of movie quote t-shirts, and more styles are being added every month, and new items are in development right now. So have a look, see if there's anything you like, and wear it with pride. The link is in the video description below. Well, the first unit's been working out of London, Italy. These stunt teams have been in Italy as well, then Spain, and now in Lisbon, Portugal. So things are moving forward. And of course, every time I post a spy shot on my Instagram, it starts a flurry of DMs. People get crazy about it. What's going on? What are we gonna do? Blah, 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 blah. Recently, I've been getting a lot of, shall I say, hostile DMs from followers asking me why Universal is still making these crappy movies. Especially when they're ridiculous, according to the people who are DMing me. Well, the reality is, as long as Universal is making at least a 4-to-1 return on their money, they will keep going and keep making these movies. Why wouldn't they? Frankly, if you know anything about Hollywood production, it's generally accepted that to truly be worth producing, the studio wants to see at least a 4-to-1 return. So if a movie costs $250 million to produce, the studio wants to see box office take of about $1 billion or more. Anything above that is a bonus, basically. So let's take a look at the box office numbers, starting with Fast 7. This is the one where Brian fades into the sunset. That movie took home $1.5 million on a budget of about $250 million. So that makes about a 6-to-1 return. So of course they were going to make a Fast 8 because they made a ton of money. Fast 8 made a little over $1.2 billion on the same $250 million budget. Not as good as Fast 7, but that was to be expected given that Paul Walker wasn't really a part of it until they dubbed him in the end. Next was the true test, which was Fast 9. The official budget was $200 million, but it has been quietly whispered that the real cost was closer to $300 million, and this movie only made $726 million, which sounds like a lot, but that's just over a 2-to-1 return. So some might say the franchise seemed to be running out of gas with the absence of Paul Walker. Also, you have to consider that the fact that the pandemic delayed the release of Fast 9 a couple times, which cost them money, and the fact that true fate of Brian Connor is still a mystery and still getting teased by previews, and then you get in the theater and they don't close the plot hole. Where the hell is this guy? Where is Brian O'Connor? What is he doing? Is he running daddy daycare? It's an inexcusable plot hole that they're going to have to close or just risk being ridiculed on and on and on. That's also in that movie. Han comes back from the dead to raise a daughter. What? Wow. Where has he been for the last 5 movies? If all of that was not responsible for the box office drop, maybe it's the movies seem to be rehashing the same plots over and over again. A long-lost relative or an enemy reappears in their lives with a new threat, and the whole Dominic Toretto street racing team is the U.S. government's only hope and top choice. What?
Are you stupid or something?
Forget CIA operatives, forget Navy SEALs. We need Toretto's street team because they can drive. All right, let's ignore that. Speaking objectively, the reincarnations of Han and Letty were ridiculous plot lines in the smack of 1970s soap operas. Most of the audience wasn't even around then, so they don't get it. And then don't get me started on the car going into space. I've covered that ad nauseum. I won't go over it again, but you know my feelings. My sentiments, though, are mirrored by many of my Instagram followers and YouTube commenters. The vast majority of my automotive savvy friends also agree with the ridiculousness. But if everybody's bitching about it, who's watching these movies? Now that we're getting more information about the production and pictures are starting to pop up from Fast 10, it looks like Universal is back at it again, just rehashing the same shtick they've been doing for the last 5 films. Super spies, global domination, insane stunts, strapping rockets to the sides of cars. And while I know there will be at least some kind of JDM presence, at least a car like these wide-body S30 Datsun 240Zs, which is probably Sung Kang's doing. Thank you for that, Sung. But if you're hoping for a street racing-focused main storyline, don't get your hopes up because you're set for a disappointment. The rumor is that there is going to be a street racing scene with some JDM cars, but that's all I've heard so far. But many have told me that they just stopped going to these movies. But from where I sit, I just don't see that. What I'm seeing is that these movies are still very popular and they're making a ton of money at the box office. So if my friends aren't watching, and automotive enthusiasts aren't watching, and so many others on my Instagram and YouTube are saying they're not watching these movies, who is? Where's this money coming from? The movies make a ton of money. Somebody is watching these films. That got me really curious. What does that audience look like? I was genuinely interested and I spent a lot of time doing research. I looked into the demographics of the audience. Not much available data on this publicly, so I had to go back to around 2015 after the release of Fast 7. Remember that movie? That was completed after the passing of Paul Walker, so we knew that was going to have a big box office because audiences want to see what that was going to look like. The data was pretty interesting and it was not quite what I thought. I learned that about 40% of that audience was Latino, about 25% were black, about 24% are white, and the rest are Asian. So that means that more than 70% of the audience is not white, which I only thought it was going to be a mixture. It's going to be split, like 33% Latino, white, and black, that kind of thing. So then I thought the audience must be comprised of younger viewers, those who might not care about convoluted plot lines, gaping plot holes, reincarnation themes and that kind of stuff, and science fiction like physics that just don't work, and so on. So I figured that the number one age group of the audience would be middle schoolers through high schoolers, say 13 to 19, given the PG-13 rating of most of these movies. But nope, I was wrong again. The latest public data notes that almost 70% of the audience is over 25 years of age. Really? Okay. So this data confirms what I've been saying for years. The Fast movies are not aimed at automotive experts, and these are not, the automotive experts are not going to see these films. They are fictional action films along the lines of James Bond movies, right? Physics be damned, plot consistencies be damned. These movies are about car chases, car crashes, fights, explosions, supervillains, and all that kind of stuff. They're James Bond movies with more cars, that's what it is. Universal has it down to a science too, they really do. And I'll be honest with you, I've gone to the theater to watch every one of these films. Why? It's the same thing with the James Bond movies. Even as a kid, I remember when Moonraker came out, which was a crap movie, and I knew Bond movies were fiction, okay? And I knew the physics didn't work, and I knew that it was all nonsense, but it had several things that I wanted. Cool cars, pretty girls, and the bad guys always get their justice, right? Good enough for me at that age. Even today, when I walk into the theater, I want to be entertained, and I'm still entertained by the Fast and Furious movies. I was laughing my ass off on the Pontiac Fiero going into space, and I still enjoy some of the characters in the franchise. But it's getting harder for me to watch these movies, given that I'm not 25 anymore. Pictures taken on set from Fast 10, though, don't give me much hope. Dodge Chargers are the main car again.
No.
Okay, for God's sake, can we just stop this insanity? I understand the value of product placement, but now it's just getting to be a joke. It's just too much. You can put a couple Dodge Chargers on it, but do we have to see all of them, 12 of them, and I'm just sick of it. A few weeks ago, I was talking with a really good friend of mine whose opinion I very much respect. I've known this person 20 years, and we've been in the car industry one way or another together for a long time. But I don't remember how the conversation started. Something like, did you see they're making another movie? I said, yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I have to talk about it all the time. He said, at this point, it's clear that Universal is just milking this cash cow, and they don't care if these movies win any Academy Awards. It's all about the money. The characters are one-dimensional. There's no character arc. They're stereotypical, misogynist, machismo and all that kind of stuff. But they're still making money, so why would they even consider stopping, which is something I've been saying for years. He also said, you gotta know, though, but some of these actors are saying to themselves or to their closest friends that these scripts and storylines are absolutely absurd, but hey, I'm getting paid. I'm just going to do it. To which I replied, well, actors get paid to act. When somebody wants to hire them to act, they should take the role, right? That's how I figure in my head. But he said, he countered that a penny. He said, not always. I wonder how they'll look back at their roles in these movies 20 years from now. Maybe they're sitting down with Vice and they're doing an interview about 20 years ago and all that kind of stuff. You know what? On second thought, I don't think I should have been on that movie because it was a turd. You can look at somebody like Dwayne Johnson. He was one of the characters who stepped away from the franchise of his own volition, right? He said it very publicly because he didn't like Vin Diesel's attitude and work ethic. To me, that made me respect this guy even more, because what he basically was saying that I'm going to leave the series knowing that I'm going to lose money. But I don't care, because it's about my ethics. I've had enough. I don't want to be a part of this anymore, not if he's a part of it. And he just walked away. But he was the exception. To my knowledge, no other actor walked away from the series except maybe Johnny Strong, who played Leon, who said in an interview many years ago around, I think it was Fast Five, that he had walked away because it wasn't his jam, essentially, and he wanted to do other stuff. But what's more telling is that many famous actors and actresses have flocked to the franchise. They wanted to be in it, like Helen Mirren and Gal Gadot. They're famous actresses. Why would these people come to these movies that aren't going to win any Academy Awards or be praised by movie critics? The reason is this franchise is a powerhouse. It's a machine. It's a mythology now. It's huge. It has survived 2 decades, and that's something in today's world, and that just doesn't happen often. How many other movie franchises have lasted that long without making a turd of a movie in this series? My friend also had one last point to make, in that Universal, being a part of the woke machine that is Hollywood, chose to release Fast 9 to China first. That's where the debut was. And then he went on to say, do you remember when John Cena said in an interview that Taiwan was a country? Do you remember that controversy? I said yes, and of course we all know that China stubbornly asserts that Taiwan is a renegade province. We just had an incident with Nancy Pelosi here this past week. So I'm not surprised that it caused an uproar from the Chinese government, because they've been playing that card for a long time. I also told my friend that Universal probably had to move rapidly to do damage control, or China might not let Universal show any movies in China again, which would be disastrous for the studio. Yep, said my friend, and they probably had John Cena on the phone within an hour and telling him, not asking him, telling him that he will have to issue an apology. I think teaching John Cena to speak a little bit of Mandarin was a little bit over the top.
有一个错误。
And on May 18th, 2021, the film team held a press briefing on the Chinese mainland with the virtual attendance from John Cena and the film star Vin Diesel, where they thanked the fans for supporting the Fast franchise for all these years. So I guess Hollywood is woke until they start to go broke, figuratively speaking, right? But the funny thing about all that pandering to China's government was this. Fast 9 only produced $129 million on mainland China, which was nothing. So all of that aside, the politics, the commercialism, the pandering to audiences don't make these movies any better or any worse. They are what they are. They're entertainment and they're action films. I think most people will at least partially agree that these are action films now, and not so much what they were, what the first movie was. So after all, these movies are still making hundreds of millions of dollars, and no company in the world would say, hey, we're making a product that sells like hotcakes, but we don't think they're good, or they're good movies, so let's just stop making these movies. It's not gonna happen. The last part of that discussion with my buddy centered around the cars, and I knew that's usually where I wind up in these conversations. But it's a car movie, right? Well, it's an action movie with some cars, yeah, okay. So I realized that the picture car teams in Hollywood are addicted to muscle cars, and I appreciate that, because that's what they grew up with, that's what they've been using all these years, and while Fast 10 will continue with that trend, I'm sure there are people still screaming about JDM stuff, but you gotta look at the big picture. Credit has to go to Dennis McCarthy and his team for coming up with some amazing specialty vehicles over these years, custom-built machines, scratch-built machines, and even loaner cars from people who are well known for building crazy cars. And they've even had some multi-million-dollar exotics in these movies, so there's been a lot of variety by any standard. But 10 movies in, I'm just getting fatigued of seeing old muscle cars. If you've ever driven one of those old cars, you'll know that if you're running from terrorists or super spies, those are the last freaking cars you want to be in. Old school muscle cars handle like a sponge and stop like an aircraft carrier. So other than dedicated drag race cars, most would be whipped and waxed by any modern BMW M car or Audi RS anything, Mercedes AMG, or of course any modern exotic, McLaren's, whatever. But before you come at me as a muscle car hater, just understand that I've owned many of these cars and I know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that the reality is they cannot compete with the cars that are on screen with them. So why are they still using them? And frankly, now that this franchise is global, maybe it's time to move away from muscle cars and jump into modern cars. My friend friend and I definitely agreed on that point. We would much rather see BMW M's than an old 67 El Camino. But whatever happens, Universal has said Fast 11 is the last of this series. If they eventually decide to reboot the franchise with new faces, perhaps the children of the main actors and so forth, I imagine it won't happen for a few years to work out the details and see what that looks like. By then, we may be all driving electric cars, so maybe the Toretto street racing team can take back a nuclear energy plant from a super terrorist who shut down all car charging stations around the world. Well, that would be fantastic, right? And the cars would sound like this. So what I'd like to know from you, how you, my YouTube subscribers, feel about this. Do you still go to these movies? And if not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. And just remember, since Universal is monitoring my YouTube channel regularly, you can bet that they'll see your comments. So please state your opinions politely, please. That's it for this time, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.